What's crack-a-lackin' Toxic Crew? My name is Toxiquid, and menus! One of the great things that video games do to streamline the user experience is to provide a jumble of text and shapes to make something that both feels great and looks great to explore while detouring from your main experience. And today, I'm going to be highlighting some of the best menus that I've seen in video games throughout the generations, that being all the iterations of the menus in the Legend of Zelda series, starting from 1986's The Legend of Zelda to 2019's The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. Also, it's Zelda month, so this is my obligatory Zelda video. So let's just jump right into it. The first Zelda game was really simplistic, operating on the same hardware that just powered Clu Land. Looking at the menu, we can tell that black and blue was all the rage, as everything is centered around that aesthetic. But looking at this menu, there are some things to note, that being the inventory screen that houses such staples as the bomb, the bow, the raft, etc., as well as the giant fucking triangle. For context, in this game, the objective is to go to 8 dungeons and collect pieces of a fancy golden triangle called the Triforce, so that is there to track your progress. But before we move on, there's actually another menu in the game, exclusive to the dungeons, with a compass and a dungeon map readily available once you get them in that level. Overall, this menu gets a solid 6 out of 10. So, since we got the basics out of the way in what a Zelda menu needs, that being a marker for your progress, your inventory, and what you can assign to each button, I think it's high time to jump into the future with the adventure of Oh Christ, what is that? That is not a Zelda menu, that is a Mega Man menu! But, as this is the second game in the series and is radically different from every other Zelda game thus far, I might as well give it a fair shot. For starters, this is just a shopping list. Everything is lined up from least to greatest cost in Magic. Also, like its older brother, is strictly function over form. And there are these upgrade menus, but nothing really else stands out from it. 2 out of 10. At least it has a fun border. But enough about that bullshit, let's talk A Link to the Past. Holy shit, look at this menu. Mwah! Perfection. Everything is their own little quadrant like in Zelda 2, but is horizontal and screen spanning like in Zelda 1, while having their own little panache with the color-coded quadrants, having a green outline for the items, a yellow for progression like the crystals and upgrades, and red for the actions. And that increase divided down the middle to signify the division of the menu? Brilliant! 8 out of 10. Disgusting. We'll get back to you later. It's time to jump into the third dimension now. Ocarina of Time for the Nintendo 64. The only time I'm going to be covering 2 iterations of a menu, spanning 2 radically different systems. Unlike Link's Awakening, as the 3DS has 2 screens, they made it so that the menu system is radically different there than on the Nintendo 64. But starting out with the original, they really went into this whole 3D thing, having a 4-wall structure, each wall having a different purpose. The first menu is the inventory, having stuff be organized in a way that at a glance, it looks like it has no consistent pattern, like having spells be integrated vertically and the bottles horizontal. But then again, it does grow on you after a while. The next screen is the map, and in dungeons it does change with stuff that only applies to dungeons, like the dungeon map and compass. Next up is the equipment tab, where it shows stuff like your tunic, your swords, your shields, and your boots, which is why the water temple is hated so much, as you have to go into the menu and manually switch it every time, as you can't assign these things to hotkeys. And lastly, the 4th wall is your progression tab, where it houses all the medallions and jewels that you collect, alongside the songs on the ocarina that you've learned, and other stuff like Skulltulas. This is a lengthy menu at first, and I've gotten confused at some times, but the 4-wall 3D structure is something that I personally think looks alright, and works functionally. So, I'd say this gets a 7 out of 10. And a short time later, we got to see a moon fall into Termina and Majora's Mask, where it carries the same menu layout from Ocarina of Time, but replacing the equipment menu with the screen dedicated to all the masks. And god damn, there are a lot of masks! The main transformation masks make up the right side vertical column, and all the others are organized in no particular order. Sure, there's a slight tweak to the aesthetics, but it's similar enough for me not to talk about it verbatim. So, this too gets a 7 out of 10. Back to the Game Boy Color, the Oracle games, being Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons, are the same menu. They have the same menu, which is bland and only functional, which is a common thing for handheld Zelda games. It's just a blank white screen with all your items, so both of them just get a 4 out of 10. Nothing more, nothing less. But A console generation later, we get Zelda 4 Swords. This doesn't have an item menu. This gets a 0 out of 10. GameCube time! And the first game that really sets up distinct styles for Zelda menus is The Wind Waker. And god damn, this really works. The torn treasure map aesthetic, the green that not only complements Link, but also might complement the world that you travel in, that being it's more lush and natural and green than other Zelda games. No, not you! But also the 6 sections that it has is set up really well, and it functions really smoothly. The HD one did it really well as well. This is all amazing. This gets a 9 out of 10. Getting back down to earth, 4 Swords Adventures. I know, they even made a sequel to that one. But actually, this one has a menu, and I guess it's alright. Average, it's 5 out of 10, nothing much to say. The Minish Cap, on the other hand, is a pretty tight Zelda menu. It really flexes the sprite art, as is the first Zelda menu on a handheld that contains more than 8 bits. The bottles are in a really nice place, the even amount of items land well on a 4x4 grid, and the quest status screen makes an effort to make a concise menu with the main MacGuffins offset to the right, with the other 4 things like the Tingle statue and the heart container off to the left. So far this is tied for the best menu I've seen, scoring a 9 out of 10. 2006 rolled around with the release of Twilight Princess, the edgiest addition to the series thus far, and with that, I get to introduce a variation on the item menu, that being the command wheel. This is a very self-explanatory term. You press a button and a wheel comes up with some stuff, in this case all the items you can get in the game, with such classics like the hook shot, the bomb, and the famous Hawkeye goggles. This quick select menu is actually really nice and really fits the style of Twilight Princess, having desaturated colors and super complex shapes. This also is a very nice quick select menu that will be adapted into future titles. There's also another menu, and it actually looks pretty nice, having the sword, shield, and tunic selectors like in Ocarina of Time, as well as having other stuff like the heart container meter and miscellaneous items like the wallet and sculpture list off to the side. This set of menus is a really nice combination of function and form, and it also fits the aesthetics that the game is set, so they both get a combined total of 8 out of 10. Later that year, the sequel to The Wind Waker, The Phantom Hourglass, came out, and with it, 3 separate menus, being the Collection, Sea Chart, and Map. I'm not even going to cover one of those, as off to the right, there's the Items tab, and that's what we're going to be looking at today. And, it's just a list. It's not intrusive, luckily, as it only takes up a 1/7 of the screen, so it works. And it has a really nice treasure map aesthetic, so with that, I think it gets a 5 out of 10. Not too shabby. But for those who were wondering, the Collection tab gets a 6 out of 10, as everything is organized really well and the colors fit. I don't really have that much to say on the Phantom Hourglass, so let's just move on. Choo-choo chugging on over to Spirit Tracks, they really improved on what they had in the previous game, condensing 2 small tabs into 1 medium-sized tab. Sure, it takes up a 1/3 of the screen, but I guess it makes sense. The organization is there, the icons make everything pop, and the colors look nice enough to stand out without it being overly intrusive. The green is a nice touch, and the orange to highlight all of the items really goes a long way, and with the collection, map, and rail map right below the items, it makes it easier to prioritize what you need to see in moment-to-moment gameplay. I really like this menu, so it gets a 7 out of 10. The only reason it isn't higher is that I could see people hitting the wrong button with their fat, meaty fingers. It's the same deal with the Phantom Hourglass. Remember how I said a few minutes ago that I was going to cover Ocarina of Time twice? Yeah, now is the time. The difference between the remakes on the 3DS and other DS Zelda games is that the original games that they're remaking utilized only 1 screen, and as the 3DS had 2 screens, they had to get creative with that, so they utilized the touchscreen as a makeshift menu. They also did this with the Wii U's Twilight Princess and the Wind Waker HD remakes, but as Ocarina of Time was the first, I'm only going to cover that one for the sake of time. So let's just jump right into it. Looking right at it, it looks really solid, no pun intended, with the stone looking background. And with the hearts and submenus at the bottom, it's non-intrusive and looks really nice. And if you look at the corners, they also have some fun functions, with the left side being somewhat practical and the right side being really practical, as you can assign more items to them, effectively allowing you to carry 5 items at a time, preventing repeated item menu visits. And everything is displayed right there, alongside a handy dandy map and everything you need, like your hearts, your magic gate, your rupee counters, etc. And the item menus are also very simple, and instead of the forced 3D perspective like the original, it is all very flat and simple. A nice touch is now the boots and such are now items instead of equipment, so the water and shadow temples are a lot less infuriating to complete. And so with the overall streamlined changes, I give this menu an 8 out of 10, 1 point higher than the originals. And now, we finally get back to home consoles with the release of 2011's The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. This time, there's a lot of menus, but I will be naturally covering the item wheel and gear menus, as those are the most relevant. The item wheel is functionally similar to what Twilight Princess had, but with a lot less stuff to keep, as motion controls can be finicky. Not really much to say, but it is very functional. I guess the wooden frames make it look nice, and the blurred white backgrounds make everything pop more, but I digress. The gear menu is really meaty though, and packs a lot of stuff in it, fitting the themes of Skyward Sword along with it. The borders have a really nice tan texture adorned with a thick blue bezel, with the gear parts simultaneously popping and fitting in together quite nicely. The aforementioned item wheel is also in the center of this gear menu, and so it is very nicely placed, drawing your eye to everything around it. On the left is a very nicely integrated diamond-shaped thing where the sword and goddess pearls go, and on the bottom is a nice place for the heart pieces to go, as well as the gratitude crystal satchel, displaying how many things you got in there. And on the right, you got a lot of little stuff, like the songs for your harp, always equipped items, and stone tablets, etc, etc. This is a very concisely designed menu, and so for me, it gets a 9 out of 10. As we are nearing the end of our journey, we get to make a pit stop at my favorite Zelda game, that being A Link Between Worlds, and the menus do not disappoint as well. All bias aside, it makes use of both screens for the gear menu, and the bottom screen is what I'm going to be referring to as the overview menu. So starting with the overview menu, it looks really nice. The map has a very nice touch of being a rolled up treasure map, complete with a pin and button to section off the entire world to complete the search for each Mai. And a wooden table background making the items pop more is very much appreciated. Lastly, in terms of the overview menu, the bottom bar is similar to other DS Zelda games in that they are used to access deeper menus and a musical instrument, in this case the bell, which calls Irene for fast travel. But moving on to the other menus being the gear and item menus, they look really nice. The gear menu is pretty clear in that it uses the circular theme of completion that other Zelda games use, as well as the sectioning off of other things that are of equal importance. The collection menu is the same, being simple and clear, without compromising the style that really makes it look nice. And something that we'll get to in just a minute is style. It really captures it and makes it look like it's part of the world. But for right now, let's move on. This one gets an 8 out of 10. Now on to the final exclusively portable Zelda game, Triforce Heroes. And for this one, it is a very unique menu, as like 4 Swords and 4 Swords Adventures, the item and gear menus are non-existent. In its place, we get to learn how to get fabulous. The costume menu is the same as the item menu overall, but without all the items. All the menus in here are functional and are full of pizzazz. Fun menu overall, very little utility. 6 out of 10. And here we are, Breath of the Wild, the 2017 Game of the Year. And to be blunt, this is a functional menu, but it does not represent the game well. It is super simplistic, which is reminiscent of the UI, but it's boring. The only interesting thing on screen is Link, which is off to the right to show the changes that will happen. The amount of some menus are absurd here as well. There are swords, shields, bows, clothing, which is unorganized, materials, which is also unorganized, food, and miscellaneous. What the hell? This is an overall good menu, but with the odd way it's set up, I'm gonna have to dock off points. This menu is a 5 out of 10. That's the same rating I gave 4 Swords Adventures. That's how bland it is. It's now later. So for 2019's Link's Awakening for the Nintendo Switch, they redid the menu, and it vastly outshines everything in Breath of the Wild tried to accomplish. It's visually appealing with eye-catching colors and shapes, the way everything is set up into little quadrants, the light tan outline for the circular item placements, the dodecahedron bounding boxes, the vibrant items, all of that. I think this is the peak of traditional Zelda menus. This one gets a 10 out of 10. And that wraps up the overview on what all the menus look like and function as. But I'm going to do something a little unorthodox and rank my top 3 favorite menus based on the criteria that I set up prior, in that the designs need to be clear, concise, and fits with the general theming of the game. So with that, let's just jump right into that. Number 3, Skyward Sword. God damn, this menu looks nice. Everything fits the criteria, it is all visually appealing, and the aesthetics look really nice. Bravo Nintendo. I love this one. Number 2, the Minish Cap. I think what really gets me is the pixel art aesthetic. The stone rune design, the withered stone cuttings where all the items go in. I really think that this is the best handheld Zelda menu. Like, I really like this one. Some honorable mentions. Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. They look nice, but they did a little bit too much for it to be top 3. A Link Between Worlds. Everything looks real nice, but it is kinda basic. Twilight Princess. It fits the criteria, but it's really dark and overly detailed at a glance. But, for right now, let's get to that number 1 pick. Number 1. Link's Awakening for the Nintendo Switch. Holy shit! This menu is awesome, as it should be! In Link's Awakening, you gotta visit the menu more times than you would in the average Zelda game, so it had the task of being very easy to navigate as well as visually appealing. So I think that nailed it perfectly, and I really like this menu, despite the game being very short. And with that, I'm done analyzing and ranking all the Zelda menus. Thank you so much for watching, and a big thank you to all the patrons. And if you ever want to see videos like this early, please consider donating there. And with that, I'm gonna get going. Happy Zelda month, and I'll see y'all next time.